Hey, this is Dan Crothers. I've been watching the news lately today, and it's not a pretty picture. But one thing is certain that we see constantly, and that is the corruption and the not fair politics that's being played out. I mean, we have major criminals getting away with major crime on a daily basis right out in front of the entire world to see. We have danger lurking around the corner. Not that it's not going on now, it is. But we're looking at the worst is yet to come. So what we're going to do is take a look at some news clips, starting with Tucker Carlson here, and see what he has to say about the news. And I like what's happened with him. I'm glad he got fired. I was amazed that he even got to broadcast as long as he did until they fired him, because he wanted to tell the truth. And even he was ignorant about the corruption behind the scenes. But he's not so ignorant anymore. So let's check out one of his.
In the end, most governments are run by a small group of people for their own benefit without reference to what the majority wants.
Here we go. Boom, boom.
We are supporting a government, paying for the entire government, that has banned opposition parties, put opposition leaders in jail, shutting down free speech.
Brows and a solemn tone, he dives into the tumultuous state of the nation, leaving no stone unturned.
You can have a system that nobody actually supports except the people directly benefiting from it. This is the main thing I've learned in the past 5 years that I'm 54, I've lived in this country my whole life. And because I, unlike everyone else in Washington, actually kind of believed in the basic premise of democracy, which is the majority rules, that's the most basic fact of democracy. The people run their own government.
You often hear people say the news.
I'm looking for one person per city to join my program, but only one person for each city. So if you're watching this video, it means no one from your city had joined my program yet. But keep in mind, maybe people from your city are already.
News is full of lies. But most of the time, that's not exactly right. Much of what you see on television or read the New York Times is in fact true in the literal sense. It could pass one of the media's own fact checks. Lawyers would be willing to sign off on it. In fact, they may have. But that doesn't make it true. It's not true.
There are clergy in who are being thrown in prison. Convents raided, nuns kicked out, priests handcuffed, thrown in jail. So, I mean, on one level, you think, well, it's not my country. You know, they do all kinds of barbaric things around the world. Can't be upset about all of them. Much more interested in what's happening in El Paso than I am in here.
That's now the law. And that's totally untrue. You can put it in a ballot referendum, some judge will overturn it. Well, what about democracy? You can spend billions of dollars on a foreign policy theory that nobody actually supports.
Amidst the cacophony of societal discord, his words become a call for introspection and reconciliation.
If I tell you that a man has been unjustly arrested for armed robbery, that is not, strictly speaking, a lie. He may have been framed. At this point, there's been no trial, so no one can really say. But if I don't mention the fact that the same man has been arrested for the same 6 times before, am I really informing you? No, I'm not. I'm misleading you. And that's what the news media are doing in every story that matters, every day of the week, every week of the year.
A country without free speech is not a democracy. Free speech is a prerequisite to democracy. You can't have it without it. You can't have a dinner party without dinner. You can't have a democracy without free speech. Period.
In the end, most governments are run by a small group of people for their own benefit without reference to what the majority wants. And I hate to believe that that's true in this country, but all the evidence suggests that it is. In fact, it's provable. You know how you prove it? Public opinion polling. Take a look at the latest Gallup poll. Pick a poll. What are the top 10 issues for people in the United States? And then compare those to the priorities of your leaders. So people are leaving Michigan because it's very hard to make a living here, and you're constantly hassled by a government that never off an economy that hasn't grown in decades, okay? That's the truth. Take a look at the priorities of the low IQ lunatic who's running your state. Gretchen Whitmer, who deserves zero respect, no respect. Her priorities are what? Putting you in jail if you, quote, misgender somebody? What percentage of the population of the state of Michigan, even southeastern Michigan, is on board with that as a top concern? It's like roughly around 1/10%, okay, in that range. The things that people care about, Gretchen Whitmer couldn't care less about. Because democracy isn't functioning. If democracy was functioning in America, in Michigan, in California, the District of Columbia where I live, state of Maine, the state of Texas.
Through the lens of his analysis, Carlson emerges as a societal critic, shining a spotlight on the complexities of modern American life.
What's it like to work in a system like that? After more than 30 years in the middle of it, we could tell you stories. The best you can hope for in the news business at this point is the freedom to tell the fullest truth that you can. But there are always limits, and you know that if you bump up against those limits often enough, you will be fired for it. That's not a guess, it's guaranteed. Every person who works in English language media understands that. The rule of what you can't say defines everything. It's filthy, really, and it's utterly corrupting. You can't have a free society if people aren't allowed to say what they think is true. Speech is the fundamental prerequisite for democracy. That's why it's enshrined in the first of our constitutional amendments.
Not only do we not have that conversation was literally banned. Now it's in the guidelines of most of the big social media companies. You can't have that conversation. So I would make a couple of points. And the most obvious one is any country that doesn't allow a free discussion of the process by which its leaders are elected is not a democracy, by definition.
How many Texans do you think are all on board with letting 7 million people cross into their state illegally? What?
Helen Hadsell was able to win any competition she took part in. She was known as the contest queen state. She read about any contest and she would just win.
Percentage. Zero. I don't care what your race or national origin. Nobody is for that. That's insane. Anything meaningful to stop that? No. The Republican governor? He's got a National Guard. He's the commander-in-chief of the National Guard, and it's Texas, so they're all large. And they have double-stack magazines in their sidearms. You think they couldn't stop that in a week if they took? Of course. Just assemble along the border. We're not doing this. No, he refuses to do that. He won't do it. And it's not like no one suggested. I've suggested. What are you doing, man? Don't you have a National Guard? Why don't you seal the border? Oh, it's very complicated. No, it's not. No, it's not. If someone's trying to break into my house, it's not complicated to repel the person. Do you have a firearm or don't? Are you willing to defend your house and your children, or aren't you? Well, it's more complicated. Really, tell me how. Speak slowly so I can understand. It's not more complicated than that. It's more dishonest than that. You're lying to me. You don't want to do it because your donors don't want you to do it. It's that simple. Greg Abbott. Liar, and worse than liar, betrayer of your own people. That's what that is. I was polite at the cocktail party, so I didn't say any of that, but I fumed internally like an Episcopalian. I thought those things. But the point is, if you assume that just because everybody wants something, you're going to get it, think again, pal. It's very likely that, in fact, you won't get anything that you want. You will just pay for what a small group of other people want. That's the way it works. Boo is right. Boo is right. It's not just frustrating, it's a betrayal of the core promise of the country, which is the people rule. That's a act.
In the realm of public discourse, he stands as a voice of reason, urging citizens to confront the challenges that divide them.
And yet at the same time, and this is the amazing thing, the undeniably big topics, the ones that will define our future, get virtually no discussion at all. War, civil liberties, emerging science, demographic change, corporate power, natural resources. When was the last time you heard a legitimate debate about any of those issues? It's been a long time. Debates like that are not permitted in American media. Both political parties and their donors have reached consensus on what benefits them, and they actively collude to shut down any conversation about it. Suddenly, the United States looks very much like a one-party state. That's a depressing realization, but it's not permanent. Our current orthodoxies won't last. They're brain. Nobody actually believes them. Hardly anyone's life is improved by them. This moment is too inherently ridiculous to continue, and so it won't. The people in charge know this. That's why they're hysterical and aggressive. They're afraid. They've given up persuasion. They're resorting to force. But it won't work. When honest people say what's true, calmly and without embarrassment, they become powerful. At the same time, the liars who've been trying to silence them shrink, and they become weaker. That's the iron law of the universe. True things prevail. Where can you still find Americans saying true things? There aren't many places left, but there are some, and that's enough. As long as you can hear the words, there is hope.
Well, just to put this in context, it's not just like you have boutique, weird right-wing views and that's how they want you to feel. Like, oh, you're an extremist. Really? I'm an extremist? I'm the one who let 7 million people into our country illegally, whose names we don't know?
Carlson embodies the collective desire for unity, giving voice to those who yearn for a more harmonious America.
And by the way, isn't it? It's so interesting, and narcissists are this way. The projection involved. It's like whatever it is they're doing, and I mean at a precise level, is exactly what they accuse you of doing. You're attacking democracy. Really, I like democracy. Democracy would give people without money and without a TV show some voice in how they are governed. Therefore, I'm for it. And they want exactly the opposite. So the middle class in America, which has been not the majority since 2015, an anniversary that nobody noticed, has less economic power than it's ever had. That's why Trump got elected, in my view. And now it has less political power than it's ever had. So if you are taking power away from large segments of your population, you are by definition attacking democracy. That's exactly what you're doing. There's no other name for it. So that's the...
Are you going to let the greedy heating companies and their crazy high prices decide if your family is allowed to stay warm this winter? Here's how a former NASA engineer from Michigan is taking on the billion-dollar heating industry with an invention that's helping families around the country stay warm inside this winter without having to pay for expensive heating or buy dangerous space heaters. Picture this. A major blizzard has just ripped through the region, with feet after feet of heavy snowfall leaving local residents stranded in their homes.
Well, okay, I like the idea.
First thing I noticed, in the name of defending democracy, we took away the things we need to have democracy, which is our core freedoms guaranteed in the Bill of Rights. Just as in our war for democracy, we are supporting a government, paying for the entire government that has banned opposition parties, put opposition leaders in jail, shutting down free speech, now shutting down an election, and putting dissident priests in prison. It's such a democracy they don't have elections anymore. That's how pure a democracy it is. But the second thing, and what's I think more applicable to this conversation, I learned, is that their response was the tell. If you want to know what they care about, if you want to know what's important, listen to how they respond when you say something unapproved about it.
His candid assessment serves as a clarion call, imploring us all to seek common ground and understanding.
Amazingly, as of tonight, there aren't many platforms left that allow free speech. The last big one remaining in the world, the only one, is Twitter, where we are now. Twitter has long served as the place where our national conversation incubates and develops. Twitter is not a partisan site. Everybody's allowed here, and we think that's a good thing. And yet, for the most part, the news that you see analyzed on Twitter comes from media organizations that are themselves thinly disguised propaganda outlets. You see it on cable news, you talk about it on Twitter. The result may feel like a debate, but actually the gatekeepers are still in charge. We think that's a bad system. We know exactly how it works, and we're sick of it. Starting soon, we'll be bringing a new version of the show we've been doing for the last 6.5 years to Twitter. We bring some other things too, which we'll tell you about. But for now, we're just grateful to be here. Free speech is the main right that you have. Without it, you have no others.
As the dramatic narrative of his commentary unfolds, Carlson's resonating voice remains a reminder that the path to healing and progress begins with acknowledging the challenges that confront us.
So you have religious freedom or freedom of speech or freedom of assembly as long as you stay within the lines. But if you express an unapproved view, then you go to jail. But that's freedom, isn't it? You do exactly what I tell you to do, or else I imprison you. Is that the freedom that you recognize? No, that's insane. And so that irritated me. And I said, well, but don't you think as a Christian leader, you should say something when Christian clergy are imprisoned for their views? No. And how dare you say that? And this person was joined by a chorus of people on the right. Yeah, shut up. Shut up. National Review wrote a piece this morning. Shut up is bigoted to notice that Christian clergy are being imprisoned. And my view would be, you know, maybe you care, maybe you don't, but if you're a Christian leader and Christians are going to jail for their views, you are required to say something. And by the way, the person I was speaking to is a person, I think, of real faith and of decency. Like, I would let him babysit my kids. Not for long, but for dinner. I mean, I don't think he's like an evil person. He's not a thing that I know of. But he, with a straight face, told me this. And he said, but what really needs, and I say this as a Christian leader, is more cluster bombs. And I thought, oh, you know who it was. And I thought to myself, more cluster bombs. Now, I am not a Bible scholar. But I'm pretty sure, having read